Hey everyone, I am so excited to be here with two queer icons, Tegan and Sara. This is a big time for you guys. Double duty, album out September 27th, book September 24th. Now, I gotta start with the book, memoir. First time doing this kind of thing for you guys. Why high school? Why not make it all about your life until now? What was it about high school that made you want to, focus it on that?
I mean, in some ways, our life from high school to now is super well documented. We put out albums every 2 years. We do interviews, press, video, blogs. We sort of feel like in a lot of ways that enough time hasn't passed that we could offer a different narrative or perspective on the life we've been having because we kind of already are like, it's already out there. It needs to age a bit,
Yes.
But adolescence for us, like our teenage years and specifically 15 to 17, those were the years where we first picked up a guitar, first learned how to write a song, first figured out that we were gay, or at least acted upon those urges to finally connect with a girl the way that one does in adolescence. Suddenly you feel like, I gotta do this, I need a girlfriend, or I need to hook up with someone, or whatever. And then I think like that sort of like path toward creativity and becoming an artist and figuring out who you want to be when you grow up, that literally all happened between 15 and 17. And that seemed like an interesting sort of origin story to what happened to the people between, high school and now.
So, Tegan, the book is written in alternating chapters. It's like in each of your voices. So what was it like, I guess, to kind of go back on that time, but also see what it was like for your sister and maybe different for you?
I think that probably was one of the bigger surprises for me, was I sort of assumed that it would be, okay, well, I'll tell this part of the story, you tell this part of the story, everything will line up, and it was so much more interesting than that. There was so much about, I think probably because we wrote so much of our interior life.
Yeah.
And, as teenagers, that's probably one of the bigger misconceptions we were hoping to, correct, which is that we were not, best friends who told each other everything, who grew up down the hall from each other, the sort of, cliche image of what a twin relationship is.
Exactly.
We were actually very disconnected from one another. We didn't really necessarily confide in one another, and there were so many things about our life that were together. But so to read Sara's side of the book and to hear so much about her interior life back then and the struggles she had was a real surprise, and it made for a very interesting read. But similar to
it's a very interesting read.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Even for me, and I'm like the other half of the book, but. And also, I think it complements the music career that we've had, which, Sara and I write by ourselves. Each of our songs are written almost entirely without the other, and then we come together. And
love that.
I think it's the quintessential Tegan and Sara sound. It's what we've always done, and in a way, this is just the version of that. What is a book?
So at age 15 and 17, we're talking, 20 years ago-ish.
Yeah.
We're on Facebook right now. There was no social media then. There was no Twitter, Instagram. How do you think your high school experience...
The good old days.
I know, right? The good old days before we all had to filter ourselves and all of that. But how do you think your experience in high school would be different, I guess, better or worse, if you had that, when you were 15 and 17?
I mean, it's almost like asking someone before electricity, what would it have been like if there was lights?
Exactly.
It feels profound. It's not a little difference. It's not like, it's not like a thing that I can even imagine for us, because we would be different people. We would have probably uploaded our music right away to the internet.
Right.
We would have probably been cultivating an audience with the sort of broader, stranger public in mind, whereas for us, we were learning to write music and establishing ourselves as creatives with our friends and family first, with our community first.
Right.
And then we were sort of putting ourselves out into the world once all of that was established. And so there's almost this sort of incubator stage that just doesn't really exist with the internet now. You really have to sort of always see yourself reflected back, even quite literally with selfies or whatever it is. We just had that sort of freedom and anonymity to kind of create in a sort of I don't know, almost childlike state before we had to go out into the mean world.
It's almost it makes what you did in the early stages, how you burst on the scene, almost that much more special, because you didn't have a platform just to go and record something or put it out for people just to see immediately.
But we also weren't competing with everybody else.
True.
I think that we also forget, now it's everybody has a SoundCloud, everybody has an audition tape, everybody's on the internet, YouTube, whatever it is. We didn't have to compete with that. We were kind of hey guys, we're here, we have music, and everybody was oh, great. It was really a lot easier.
Okay, let's have a little fun before I talk about the music, because I'm dying to talk about it. So we're talking about high school. So I want to have a little fun. Let's see. Which one of you was the better liar?
I mean, I think I probably was the better liar in that I feel like I was lying about my sexuality from the time I was like, I sort of like already knew I was gay around the time I was 10 or 11.
Wow.
And I didn't come out until I was 18. So, I mean, I was having relationships and secretive relationships, but like I actually held on to that secret for quite a long time.
Which one of you had your first kiss first?
Well, I hate to like
Take them all?
take it all. I think,
I did.
Yeah.
My first kiss was in grade 3 with Scott.
Hey, Scott. Oh.
Yeah. yeah. But I don't know. Sarah, maybe.
I count my first kiss as like a shared romantic moment. We were very young though. We were like little kids, you know, like we were
Yeah.
playing mommy and daddy type situation.
Right.
So I mean, I was young. I was like young.
The good old days.
Kindergarten,
Okay,
grade one.
last one. Which one of
When I was straight.
Right, back in the day. Which one of you had better style? And clearly you both have amazing style now, so.
I think we dressed very similar.
Did you?
Yeah,
'Cause I
we
didn't-
shared
yeah.
the same clothes.
Yeah, I think
and-
growing up we definitely dressed similarly. In high school we were.
Do you still share clothes?
We have like we create kind of what we call a tour wardrobe, and
Nice.
it'll start out as like a bunch of stuff that was bought for both of us, but then other items come in, and then you start, as you get bored with your items, they start circulating, and so
Yeah.
then you end up wearing a lot
A
of each
lot of
other's
it, yeah.
clothes, and at the end of tour,
By
it's
default,
like
yeah.
divide everything. Yeah.
There was always clothes too that like I just know are like Tegan's things. Like it's just like you don't
Like, oh,
mess
that's
with it.
Tegan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit. And then I think that was like in high school too. Like there was certain things we always were exchanging and whatever, and then there was like stuff that was like totally out of bounds. Like you
Right.
didn't ask for those things. You know?
No, I totally understand that. Okay, I got to talk about the music. September 27th.
Yes.
So excited. But like the book and the music obviously go super hand in hand. So I want to know the story. I read, okay, in the process of this book, you are, kind of, looking for stuff and you find a box of cassettes from, that's how this whole album began. Tell me all about like what that moment was like.
You know what? It was actually, well, we started writing the book and we wanted to try to find old video and
Okay.
and old music.
Mm-hmm.
And what we initially found was just old video. And then we found a cassette tape, but it had a lot of songs that are already on the internet. And that got us like thinking, geez, what about our first band? We started a band right away when we started playing music in grade 10, and it was called Plunk. And there were
Plunk.
2 tapes. And we sort of put the word out to all our high school friends who we still know to this day. And we found 1 copy of the second tape. But we were missing this first tape. And I kind of became obsessed with finding it.
Right.
And
like it's in an attic somewhere
like
or
I was
something.
like, someone
yeah.
must have kept a copy
Right.
of it. And so we did end up eventually finding it. Both got FedExed to me. I had them digitized. And Sarah and I both had a very similar response when we heard the tapes, which were like, holy these are pretty good.
Almost
they were,
like therapeutic, I would imagine.
it was
like,
cool.
yeah.
I think for both of us, one of the big things that really struck us was just how good they actually were. I think you write yourself off as a young person. I hear this all the time from people, like, oh, I would never put out my first drawings or my first songs,
Right.
but we didn't put those out. We spent a year of our lives working them and finessing them and turning them into the new Tegan and Sara record, and they're very modern in 2019.
Right.
And some of the lyrics needed to be rewritten. Took a lot of LSD back then. Like we were a little like out there and weird, and like
Uh-huh.
some of it's inaudible because they're old cassette tapes. But I think in the end, they are an incredible hybrid. I think they pay mad respect to old Tegan and Sara, but I think that they are very much what those girls back then who were writing them turned out to be. And
Were they still familiar to you, like all these
Yes.
years later? Because you guys write all your stuff, and I'm in hundreds and hundreds of songs since then. But you still like were like, I remember that time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, every song and melody is familiar to me. I mean, I think like
they're your first.
Yeah.
but also like I just think once you've written something, it's sort of stowed away in your mind, even if you don't think of it or you can't recall it without,
Right.
As soon as I was listening to the demos, I was like, I remember this one, or oh, this one has a great chorus. Like, you just remember.
There was a song called "Hello, I'm Right Here" on the album, and I think that for you, Sarah, is a time when you said you could like first imagine yourself and your sexuality, like a future for yourself. What did you mean? Like elaborate on that, because I think it's really for all of your LGBTQ fans to hear. I think that it's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I wrote the song in grade 12, and I had already had a number of years of relationships and experience, while they were secret relationships. I mean, I still sort of had a full love affair bloom and die. And then I had a second sort of like even more confusing, probably lots of gay people relate, but like that relationship with someone who like they're not comfortable with themselves, but you're obviously attracted to each other, and you sort of like hook up but never talk about it.
Ugh, yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
And so like I had that as well. So like I mean like by 17 I'd really like experienced the like, you know, the kind of like gamut of relationships. And I think at that point I was sort of asking myself like, or asking myself, reassuring myself, telling myself that clearly this wasn't just like a phase. Like this wasn't like a whoopsie daisy, I hooked up with a couple girls and it's over. Like I knew I was gay, and I finally was sort of like ready to sit down and say like, okay, like I need to figure out a future for myself, because like the future is now. It is here. I am about to leave high school. I'm about to be a grown up. And I was freaked out, but I was also feeling like for the first time really confident about, you know, whatever was going to come next.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then for you, there's a song called We Don't Have Fun Together Anymore.
We don't have fun when we're together anymore.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people would be able to relate to that, because I think it's a time when you think, you know, you've had this group of friends and you'll have them forever, and then all of a sudden, you know, you all grow and kind of change. What was that moment in time like for you?
Yeah, you know, high school was such a tough time for, like, just like everybody, you know. It's a tough time. But there were some really amazing times as well, and we had a crazy awesome group of friends, very alternative and very supportive. But there was a huge group of us, and the group kind of grew throughout high school. And by the time we hit grade 12, there were almost 30 of us that sort of had, like, this friendship with each other. And there was a loneliness in that, you know, especially as we all headed towards graduation, and a lot of the group was going to go away and go to university, and a lot, you know, had started to make plans within the city. And then, you know, there were some of us who weren't quite sure what we were going to do. And you could just see everybody starting to pull apart a little bit. And I wrote that song sort of at the height of that. And, you know, I think that there were a few key events that happened in grade 12 where there was like a level of intoxication that happened where I think I felt very disconnected and probably very sad. And I just remember the song sort of being a bit judgy, to be honest, like where I was standing on the outside thinking like, you know, we've all changed, you know?
Yeah.
Which it's so funny because we were still friends with so many of those people, and we grew back together. You know, it's the way things go, right? Everybody's in and out of each other's lives and stuff, but...
I was going to ask you, you know, after you realized the album, what was going to be on the album, was there anyone from back in high school that you were like, oh, I should call them and give them a heads up or anything? Like,
Yes.
you know, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of sort of like diplomacy of like, you know, we wanted people to like know what we were writing about, know that we were bringing back these songs and these stories. I don't like to think of it as permission, because the truth is that it's also my life. It's my stories, you know, like
100%.
These people, certainly they're part of my story, but like I've never like asked anyone for permission to like write a song about a breakup or something. Like I really took creative license in that I was aware I wanted to protect my friends, but I also didn't want to, you know, sterilize the story to the point where like, why would we even, you know, I don't even know. Why even tell it if you're not going to share some of the fun details?
Of course,
you know?
yeah. That's all part of the memoir
Exactly,
process.
and you just want to give people a heads up. Like we were like, to some of our friends who like had been party animals with us in high school, but not even party animals, who were a little more experimental, taking risks, and being a bit high risk sometimes. We were like, get right with your parents, because you're almost 40 years old. Like, I can't believe you managed to keep that secret for 20 years, but like, get right with them, because you know these were important stories. We used pseudonyms. The
story's practically unrecognizable to me. As soon as we added pseudonyms and
we were like,
legal
who's
reads
that?
of the book, like every country has a lawyer that goes through and they cut more stuff out, and I was like, this could be your story for all we know.
Right.
When our mom read the book, and she was very like, oh my God, you know, like she knows the stories, and she still was like, oh, that was really hard to read, or that, you know, I can't believe you did those drugs in grade 10 or whatever. And I'm like, God, imagine how everyone would react if we told the real story.
I know, right?
Like, we leave a lot of stuff out. Like,
you got to keep some of it.
That's for the book for like later in life when you're just like, you know, YOLO. I was gonna say like, fuck it, you know, but like, you know, there is the part of the story where you still want to be friends with the people in the book, you know. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to talk about where we're at in music, because I think it's so wonderful to see where we're at with so many more queer female musicians and artists, especially right now. We have Halsey, Janelle, Monae, Kim Petras, so many more. You know, you guys were so a part of that early on. What is it like to kind of see just a lot more of your, you know, colleagues kind of like having their moment now?
I like thinking of Janelle Monae
as your colleague.
She's my colleague. Janelle, would you like to have lunch today?
Yes. My people will kill your people, yeah.
I think it's thrilling, to be honest. In the early part of our career, like Sarah was saying earlier, like we didn't have anyone to compare ourselves to because it was just such a different time,
Yeah.
And I think it was like in the late 2008, 2009 time that like when we got on Twitter and we started to be able to reach out to each other and there started to be this community of LGBTQ artists, but lots of women specifically that we started to connect with, and it's been wonderful to see so many of them having their moment. I'm even thinking about like this fall coming out, like Monae has a new record coming out, and Shora and Soak just put out a record, and Vagabond has a new record, and I think for us we just feel so excited to see so many young LGBTQ artists, many of whom had reached out to us saying that they liked us when they were younger, like they're just a little bit younger,
Just a teensy, yeah.
and I just think through those hard years it makes me feel better. At the time in the hard years I didn't know this was happening, but now when I think of the hard years it feels less hard when I think that it was worth it because it was helping other LGBTQ identified artists or women in our industry figure themselves out and feel good about what they were doing. And so I love it. I love how much people are embracing LGBTQ culture.
Yeah.
Obviously we've had huge strides in the last few years. We also all know that doesn't necessarily trickle down to those that aren't in the entertainment business. And I think for Sarah and I, it's always keeping that in perspective. I want to celebrate all of us who are doing great and we can go anywhere and look at, we're playing all over the world. But it's part of why we do the advocacy work that we do. It's part of the reason why we started the Tegan and Sara Foundation, is that a lot of our LGBTQ family is still really struggling. And I think all of us putting our lives on blast is important. It does make change slowly, but we never ever forget that for those that make it, there are so many stories of artists and people and women in every kind of industry that are still really struggling. What's the stat? Like 50% of people are still not out at work.
It's unbelievable.
It's
I know.
tough. That's tough.
And I also think we're in a time, speaking about, speaking up, I think we're seeing even more people who are allies to the community, raise their voices. Like, I think you guys perform with Taylor Swift, right? Like a couple on stage, like she, is just being so vocal about the support for our community, with the Equality Act. I mean, how amazing is that to have someone like
in really important ways too, like that, it's one thing to sort of like show your support. What do these things mean? Like I've been joking that like during Pride Month now, it's just like ubiquitous. Like every straight person is like Happy Pride, as if it was like Valentine's Day.
Right.
But what is significant to me about what an artist like Taylor has done is that she has strategically picked a cause, picked an issue, picked a state, and said, I'm going to apply pressure. I'm going to not just make change. She can't make it, but she can force it, and she can suggest it, and she can rally her troops. And I think like that's the kind of stuff that in positions of power and privilege we can do. It's not just about slapping a rainbow on your forehead and saying like Happy Pride. It's just not. And those of us in power have an opportunity to do more. And when we see somebody like Taylor stand up and do that, and do it thoughtfully. This wasn't like a one night she just was like whatever. This is like she really thought about it and thought about where she could make the most significant impact, and she did.
She's amazing. Okay, I could go on and on, but I want to get to some fan questions.
Oh, cool.
We challenged our fans. We had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses, so I want to get to some of the highlights. So, Space Time Gay would like to know, how is it looking back at your high school experiences and music in the context of your own relationships as siblings, because that's clearly developed a hell of a lot?
I think for me, looking back at high school, but also our career, the origin of our creative, life together, all of it through the lens of Tegan, grown up, successful 2019 me, was fascinating. Because it was, first of all, incredibly hard, like way harder than I even imagined, like really diving into that time. There's so much about us that's complicated because we weren't just twins, we were gay, we were women, and we wanted to be musicians. We were coming up in a time without, rights. I mean, like, it was hard. It was harder than I thought. I think I'd allowed time to sort of erode my memory and to go back and sort of put it all together. It was pretty fascinating, but it made me really proud of us. So I'm really glad I'm glad Sarah and I have gone on this journey this last year and a half. I know people are like, oh, I never want to look at my photos from high school. I would never share all of that stuff. But for me, it's been an incredible privilege that we were able to do that.
I think you get to a point when you can be okay with going back and say, oh, I did look like that in high school, or I did,
Yeah.
do those
We're
things.
just right on that edge where it's
Right.
like cute. Like,
You're
I'm like,
right.
oh, my chain is so cute. Look at my hair. I
Right.
haven't had a haircut in 13 years. How cute.
Okay, this is a good one. I feel like a fool is asking, I'm passionate about fighting for equality and other issues, but I often feel like I'm not taken seriously by others. What advice do you have on dealing with people who disregard what you have to say?
Well, defiant me is like, then don't hang out with those people. I mean, like, I spent a lot of years trying to talk people into caring about, believing, and fighting for the things that I cared about. And I found that I actually, I feel more empowered and more helpful and more successful when I'm surrounded by people who are doing the work that I want to do. So if I want to see power and change come to marginalized communities, then work within those communities. You know,
love that.
don't be at the bar being like, no, seriously, you guys, you have to believe me. Because I was doing that. I was, as a teenager, and a young adult.
I was going to say, you were at a bar?
Well, you can drink at 18, yeah, I was. You can. At 18, I could start going to the bar. And I often surrounded myself by people who were not allies. I thought they were allies because they liked me, and that's different.
That's very true.
Liking
Yes.
someone does not mean that you are a good ally. Sometimes being related to a person does not make you a good ally. So
True.
it is about recognizing what allyship means, and then recognizing, because also the other problem is that just because you're gay doesn't mean you have good politics. So if you're political and you're working for change, surround yourself by people who are actively working in those communities and doing those things.
I love that. Last one. Okay, Monica83 says, any plans to turn your memoir into a movie or TV show accompanied by a soundtrack? Which we have the soundtrack. But.
We are definitely hard at work at figuring out what high school could eventually be in another format.
Okay.
That's all I can say about it.
To be continued. And I have to say, one of the biggest questions that we got asked was, are there going to be mailboxes when you go on tour?
Okay.
And what is the status of your cats?
They're my cats, so that's one status update, is that Tegan does not own them.
That's
I
right,
do.
my bad. You're the cat lady.
Proud of it. My cats are lovely. They are now Canadian. This is new. They were American, and then I shipped them across the border, so they now, they both have like Canadian flag tattoos.
So sweet.
Yeah, they sing they always start the day with the anthem. Like meow, 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 meow. That wasn't a cat.
I like that one.
No, the cats are great. I love having something to care for outside of my own life and whatever. And the mailbox, it's probably not going to come out on tour. We're
doing a whole new thing this
yeah,
tour.
I think we're going to do
Yes.
something else to interact with fans. The mailbox is wonderful, but what it ended up being was a lot of labor.
I can
and
imagine.
It was labor
yes.
intensive, and we did feel that a few people exploited the system. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone, the album comes out September 27th, and the memoir comes out 3 days before on September 24th. Thank you so much. It's so good to talk to y'all.
Thanks for having us.